Caterpillar is staying put, but business wants a better climate in Illinois, and Springfield and Chicago will both soon have new mayors. That's next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state government, sometimes the federal government, and how it just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register, and got kind of a special show with a couple of new guests today to bring added perspective to our audience in Central and Western Illinois. Immediately to my left, Alex Degman, who is a Statehouse reporter for Illinois Radio Network at the Capitol, serving 55 stations across the state. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, sir.
Benjamin Yount is back. And
yeah, I guess I'm just, the same old retread. Not
you
a
are
special new flavor.
I would never call you a retread. He is a reporter for Illinois Statehouse News, which provides, print and audio and video to any outlet that wants it in the state.
The talking picture radio on your desk is the best way to get it.
And welcome back. Eric Zorn is here, columnist with the Chicago Tribune, who keeps an eye on lots of things in the state, and it's an honor to have you with us, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Springfield, and I hope you're enjoying your visit. One of the things that happened this week was Governor Quinn met with Doug Oberhelman, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who is the CEO of Caterpillar, because there was some bad publicity a few weeks ago for the state saying that, well, Caterpillar CEO issued a letter saying other states want our company and they're inviting us over there, and so this made everybody do stories. Is Caterpillar leaving Illinois, which of course is tens of thousands of employees and big manufacturing plants in various cities, including Peoria and Decatur. So, but then Governor Quinn met with the CEO, and basically the CEO said, we're staying, things are not that bad, we expected the tax increase, we hope it's really just 4 years, but we have some problems like workers' compensation and we'd like to improve the business climate. So where are we, Ben?
Well, Cat's not leaving, that's good. The business climate hasn't changed in the past week, and it may not do so anytime soon. We wrote a piece. We actually called up lawmakers from Decatur, where there's a big plant, East Peoria and Aurora, and talked to those who voted for the tax increase, said, do you regret it? It was almost a universal no. Talked to the new folks who replaced some lawmakers who did vote for the tax increase but are no longer in their seats, and they said, see, this is why we shouldn't have had the tax increase. But the business climate goes way beyond just the corporate income tax, which did go up. But that, as the governor's office was a bit slow to point out, but very loudly did point out, CAT only pays the corporate income tax on what they sell here in Illinois. And what they're selling now, it's fueling their growth, are big mining machines and big tractors to the growth markets in Asia, China, India, that area. So they're not really getting hit with that tax, but they do have to pay workers' comp. They have to pay some of the other costs that go into being here in Illinois. They do get some breaks. They've got some very nice roads coming into Peoria for them.
Well, it helps having a United States Secretary of Transportation rail hood from Peoria.
Peoria has some very, very nice roads for a number of very nice people. But when you talk about the overall business climate, it's not just taxes. It's fees, it's permitting. What takes 10 days in Indiana, so says the Illinois Chamber, can take 9 months here in Illinois. There's a streamline that they have a whole plan, 19-page book where they talk all of the things that they want, and it goes
they
from
meaning the Chamber,
the Chamber
Illinois
of
State Chamber of Commerce,
and it goes from taxes and fees all the way down to education and actually making sure that the state pays the $5 to $8 billion that it owes into the Illinois economy.
I would think that would be true. That part of the business climate is what kind of workers are being educated in your communities. What kind of and if your state agencies are functioning, if they're treating the drug addicts who aren't breaking into your business or whatever. I mean that to look too narrowly at business climate, and it doesn't sound like Caterpillar is really. I mean
they understand that.
And when you look at some of these states that were coming to us, like Wisconsin and New Jersey, saying bring your business to us, I mean there are a lot of factors that go into why a business locates where it does, and also a lot of factors when you're talking about moving a company like CAT. I mean it's not like someone's running it out of his basement and he goes, well, I'll just move to Trenton. I mean it's a huge expense to do that.
Governor Quinn had some fun with some of the other governors that were coming in, including Governor Christie of New Jersey. Like, who's going to move to New Jersey? To do so, you would have to move to New Jersey.
To New Jersey.
workers' comp is something that in our governor's race was discussed. Bill Brady, the Republican candidate, had said, Indiana costs twice as much per employee as Illinois for a factory. So is any progress being made that we're aware of in Alex?
Well, there are a couple of, options that are being floated right now. Recently, the Illinois House passed a resolution to do a complete audit of the entire Workers' Compensation Commission, but then there's also one that's being hotly debated as we speak. It's John Bradley from Marion. He's introduced a proposal to just do away with the entire system.
Which is very interesting, because that would throw any workers' comp claims between employer and employee. If they can't work them out, they go to court.
Right, exactly.
So possibly flood the court system.
Exactly, and that's the argument that a lot of Republican lawmakers, and I guess from both sides of the aisle, are really throwing out right now. Can we really do this to the circuit court system? Is there enough is there enough room to handle all of these cases? And
there are lots of them, aren't there? There how many thousand workers' comp claims are there a year? I mean,
well, I don't know how many thousand, but what's interesting is, this is a system that also comes under scrutiny because of some potential or apparent possible abuse.
No.
As in, what's the prison downstate?
Menard.
Where you have
every guard has got carpal tunnel from locking
like
the
at least
cells.
a few hundred cases. People are getting settlements for carpal tunnel and like thousands of dollars a piece. That's very weird.
Well, and
the
federal
Belleville News
investigators.
Democrat has done a great job on that story.
No, that paper does deserve all the credit it gets for uncovering that. But that, I don't even know if you talk about the reforms that are on the table. Federal prosecutors, federal investigators are looking into what happened down at Menard. I don't know if that could be reformed out other than, say, with a prosecution.
Well, you have to be honest when you claim things.
Yeah, I mean, if you're scamming the system, you're scamming the system no matter what the reforms are.
Of course, the other thing, I think one of the issues is Illinois, I think, is more liberal than some other states in allowing pre-existing injuries to be claimed through work. So,
injuries that are only tangentially related to the job, as I understand.
Well, certainly employers would argue that it's a lot easier in Illinois to get your employer to pay for an injury that might have existed before than it is in other states.
Are we looking?
They want higher proof that it happened on the job.
I mean, one thing I don't know is how other states do this, and people do talk about how Illinois is a really bad state for this, but does anyone know, how do we compare to states around us or states all around the country,
again,
and how it's done?
I'm going by, I haven't done extensive research myself. I know Bill Brady talked about we cost twice as much as Indiana per employee.
I think if you compare Illinois to Indiana or Iowa or maybe even Kentucky, the costs and even some of the causation language is much more slanted in Illinois. It makes Illinois much more liberal, or we pay out more. But compared to the system in California or New York, where you have similar large populations, massive urban centers, Indianapolis is not Chicago.
And formerly, or at least at one time, strong unions,
which
have helped push their agenda in the legislature.
Yeah, Illinois is expensive. It is among the most expensive in the nation, but comparing Indiana and Illinois in every category is not always apples to apples. The only reason I know anything about the California system, had a friend who worked as an adjuster for some insurance company, and they did California workman's compensation, and people were getting paid for almost anything, just from the stories that we would
No wonder
tell.
everybody's moving out there.
It's not just the weather.
Anyway, now that we've possibly established that Caterpillar tractors will still be made in Illinois, there's also a new road program that the governor announced. Interestingly, in Chicago, I think there's a better media market up there because often those road programs are announced in Springfield, or both. But I know over 6 years, and perhaps involving federal funds too, it's like $11 billion, and the governor does say, despite our financial problems and some questions about how the capital plan will be financed, we do have money to have an extensive road fixing program this summer, so there should be a few more barricades go up and a few more traffic jams in various places. So I guess that's good news for the economy. There we are. Okay, on to the next. What do you say about that? I said it. As long as Eric is here today, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that we would not necessarily key on as much at some other times, but Rahm Emanuel, who actually worked in Springfield once on a campaign for David Robinson for Congress years and years ago, like 25 or 30 years ago.
Did he curse you out at the time?
I don't think I knew him at the time, but I understand that he was very aggressive fundraising on the telephone because people down here remember him from that. But he's going to be the next mayor of Chicago. And I'm just wondering, the Daley family has, other than a brief interlude, well, Mayor Washington in between, but you've had a combined 40-some years of Daleys in Chicago. Any thoughts given how strong people view the mayor of Chicago, often said to be the strongest Democrat in the state of Illinois, has a lot of influence in the legislature. Any thoughts on kind of changes in emphasis that we're going to see, Eric? I haven't seen Mayor Daley come down to Springfield very often. I don't know if Rahm Emanuel will, but are we really going to get a whole different kind of government in Chicago?
I don't think we're going to get a whole different kind. I've noticed that. I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me about Emanuel is that he really comes into office without owing anybody anything, because he raised so much money that he's not beholden to the unions. He's been much more aggressive in talking about challenging the unions to make cuts. We just had an inspector general's report we have about 200 truck drivers on the payroll. All they do is drive people to the job and sit there all day,
right, and sleep.
And sleeping in their cabs. And he was, basically telling the unions that it's time to make some more concessions. We've got these absurdly long labor contracts that Mayor Daley put in order to make sure we had labor peace through the Olympic Games that we didn't get. So. And Emanuel has been talking tougher there. He's not beholden to the Daleys. I mean, anyone who says that he's just going to be a puppet for the Daleys is deluded, because he just doesn't. He raised so much money. He doesn't know anybody anything.
What's interesting about that is, just for people who haven't watched it closely, if you raise so much money, usually that means you owe the people who gave it to you. Are you talking because it's nationwide, because he was Obama's chief of staff?
It's like Spielberg, and he's raising money from Steve Jobs and all these. I mean, his portfolio is it's all over. So he doesn't come in. No one can come to his office and say, "Hey, if it weren't for you, I put you over the top." He doesn't have that. He was able to raise so much money, and so it'll be interesting to see. He doesn't have those sorts of debts that he has to repay politically. The question is, I believe, first of all, I think that he's going to be extremely pragmatic. I don't think in his heart of hearts he's an ideologue in any way. He wants to be, I think, the best darn mayor in the country.
And he might say it saltier than that.
Purely, yes, and purely, but not because he's got a heart of gold, but because I think he has other political ambitions. He certainly wants to be highly regarded, and so I look for him to make moves to try to do things. He wants sort of the Bloomberg vibe in New York City, where the guy is like Mr. Competent, Mr.
Well, he wanted to be Speaker
Republican.
of the House before.
Right.
People thought he wanted to be Speaker of the House before President Obama asked him to be his chief of
I mean,
staff.
I think he's very tough. I think he's very smart. I basically think that he's honest. Now, whether this is going to lead to like wise decisions and this flowering of good government, I'm not willing to say that. But I'm fairly optimistic that he's going to take some necessary steps. So it'll be interesting.
Well, I'm gonna come back to this because it's just interesting for our folks who are more centered in downstate. There's always been this divide, as long as the 30 years I've been watching Springfield, of, well, it's downstate versus Chicago, and then versus the suburbs, and Chicago is this big bad thing. What is the image of Chicago in the legislature, and do you think the new mayor up there changes that? And I could add Toni Preckwinkle, who is the new Cook County Board president, because she took over for Todd Stroger, a former state legislator whose father was County Board President John Stroger. But Todd Stroger, by a wide variety of people, would say, ran a pretty loose operation in Cook County government, and things are tightening up, and Emanuel and Preckwinkle, the new bosses, seem to be working together, perhaps to trim things down.
There was an odd moment when Adam Andrzejewski, one of the Tea Party darlings in Illinois,
who ran for governor as a Republican,
was quoting Toni Preckwinkle in a press conference this week. I think the big test, at least, maybe not for the new mayor, but for his influence down here in Springfield, is going to be concealed carry and going to be education funding. And Mayor
Concealed
Daley,
carry, you mean against it?
Yeah.
Because
well,
we are like
guns,
the one state or two states that no longer,
that
doesn't
Illinois
allow.
and Wisconsin.
That doesn't allow
the gun
concealed
debate
carry.
this is the year. If it doesn't happen this year, it may not happen. It hasn't happened up to this point. There's still questions about home rule. Mayor Daley left no vagueness about what he felt. He does not like guns. He opposed any attempt to allow concealed carry. Chicago had some of the toughest gun regulations.
Took the Supreme Court to allow people to have guns in their homes in Chicago.
And so I wonder too, because I think that Mayor-elect Emanuel, is he mayor now, or is he still mayor-elect?
He's mayor-elect still.
I think he is extremely pragmatic. I think that he has a big picture view, and if concealed carry, if he doesn't need to fight that fight, I wonder if he's going to fight that fight. The same thing with education funding is, how is he going to approach whatever is going to come out of Springfield, whether it be a $200 million cut, a $600 million cut, race to the top was his former boss's idea, and that didn't work out at all for Illinois. In fact, it created some of the problems that are going to have to be dealt with before June 1st. All of the education reform that is being talked about centers in one way or another around Chicago and its public schools. I haven't heard anything from the mayor's office yet. I don't know if we will. Sometimes,
I expect we
some
will.
years you do, some years you don't. But I think that because he has a different, it seems from the outside, he has a different strategy, he has a different leadership style. I think that could translate and mean some big differences.
I think the question is going to be how much political capital is he going to expend on concealed carry, for instance. He's obviously against it. He said already that he's opposed to it. But there is, Mayor Daley was animated by it. You remember the news conference where he threatened to stick a bayonet up a reporter's rear end. And so, Daley is very animated by that issue. I'm not sure that Emanuel is going to, spend the political capital and the energy on it.
It does look like Illinois. It seems like this is the right turn on red. We might have been late, but it looks like it might happen, even though that would be such a big change in Illinois to allow concealed carry. But the way the whole country has gone.
Well, you're right. It's 48 states have concealed carry. Wisconsin has open carry. We're the only one where you can't carry either place. And with the Supreme Court decisions about weapons, in those decisions, I read some winks to concealed carry that the Supreme Court is ready to say that that's right. So well, here's what I want to ask you guys who are around the Statehouse more. Is there any truth to the idea that the downstate Democrats have gone along, feel like we went along with the tax increase, we went along with the death penalty abolition, we went along with civil unions.
So it's time to give us guns.
Give
us a little bit of social conservatism back.
Alex?
I would imagine that's almost pretty much spot on because Brandon Phelps of Harrisburg, he's the downstate Democrat who's been pushing for this for so many years, and he seems to think that this could be the year. This could be the year we have, as you said, we've done all of these things, and why not? Why not now? And it seems as though I'm going to point to, I guess, an NRA study that was recently released. Some people didn't really agree with the methodology per se, but it seems to suggest that Chicago may be losing its stronghold on the gun debate. More Chicago residents are for concealed carry than others may have us believe. So, with
whose poll was this?
Well, it's interesting. The U.S. Supreme Court decision allowing you to carry a gun wasn't
not possess a gun.
Right.
But it overturned the Chicago ban.
Right.
Yeah,
it might go in the
that's
same
true.
direction.
Pat Quinn didn't win anybody any seats in Southern Illinois. He took what it was, St. Clair County and Jackson County, way down on the river.
Yeah, I think just
four county twins.
It might have been
whatever. But he didn't win anybody any seats in Carbondale. He didn't win anybody any seats in Metropolis. Those folks know that they can't go back to their voters in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years and say, "Hey, listen, I'm a good Democrat. I voted with Pat Quinn." You're gonna be retired.
He really did count on Chicago to bring in that vote, and it did. Before I forget, as we go on, I had mentioned at the opening of the show that Springfield also has a new mayor, and I covered this probably more than anyone at the table because it's been my life. But Mike Houston, who is now 67 years old and was mayor for 8 years from 1979 to 1987, and ran for state treasurer as the Republican candidate in 1986, losing to Jerry Cosentino, won basically a landslide in a 4-person race April 5th for Springfield mayor, and is very eager to take over. Probably on May 2nd was the date he thought he'd probably get inaugurated. So it's just going to be an interesting transition in Springfield. It's been a very difficult time with the suicide death of former Mayor Davlin, with Frank Edwards and Alderman filling in as mayor in the interim after he was appointed by the council, and now with Mike Houston taking over. Illinois' budget problems are not as bad as the state's, but they are significant, and there's lots of other things that need fixing in town, including a lot of abandoned and boarded up buildings. So we'll see if he does it. Enough on the local there.
Headline writers will be able to say, "Houston, we have a problem."
You weren't here, but he used that in his advertising, and it seemed to work. I did want to talk a little bit about an issue that is maybe a couple weeks old, but because Eric has written about it so much, the death penalty abolition in Illinois. And there are some significant people, or some interested people in Springfield. I know Bill Clutter, a former alderman, works on the Innocence Project. I think Larry Golden. Mike Metnick is a lawyer. And Eric, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the issue that Illinois finally ended the death penalty, and I know that Mike Metnick worked on the case of Janine.
No.
Metnick
worked on the. He was really big on the Randy Steidl case, which was in Paris.
Right.
Which
He
was
might
the
have
only.
worked on the Nicaraguа case earlier too.
He may have done some work on it, but he's really known for he's
And Randy
actually,
Steidl, who was in prison for a long time for a murder he did not
He did not
commit.
commit, yes, and he was on
Yeah.
death row, and he was actually part of the testimony here. Some of the other people who were exonerated were not,
Right.
but he was hanging out at the Capitol during.
He was.
during
Yeah, I
the
saw him at a
debate.
press conference. It's very
So-
very moving to hear someone who spent so
so-
many years in prison.
And I know that there's some talk, some movement afoot to reinstate a portion of the death penalty. Like I'm not exactly sure the language of the bill, but they want to. But like if you kill a prison guard or a police officer or child, maybe they would reinstate those. And
The heinous crimes thing.
And I thought that Quinn in his when he signed it, I thought that he was going to signal that he might be open to that. That was going to be how he was going to square the circle, because when he ran, he said he was
Pro-death penalty.
well, he was said
For the
he was
worst
for
cases.
he was for the moratorium. He was right in the middle. He was like sort of straddling the issue the way politicians will. When you give the moratorium was a perfect opportunity for politicians. Like, oh, I'm in favor of the moratorium, but I'm also in favor of the death penalty. So this kind of called his bluff on that, and I thought that he might say, well, I know that I said I was for the death penalty and I'm signing this bill, but if you send me a bill that has just prison guards, police officers, children, I will sign that. He didn't say that at all. There was no opening at all for that. So that's in the next 3 years is not going to happen.
I think that the death penalty, just like you said, with perhaps you saw the writing on the wall with handguns and concealed carry, that the time may just have come. I think the time came to abolish the death penalty. Whether you agree with it or don't, they hadn't been going ahead with executions.
Not since George Ryan put on the moratorium.
Fewer people were being even
sentenced.
I mean, it changed the game for prosecutors. Your case became tougher. It became the point where if you get rid of it, you move, you take your hit, and you move on. No one's really going to miss it anymore.
Yeah, I think, Alex, do you see any fallout from this, or any movement, or are we just done because the governor said what he said?
Well, I mean, when the governor had his bill signing, I guess you would call it a ceremony/press conference, I think somebody might have specifically asked him, what about in the case of those who kill police officers? And he said, no, absolutely not. It's got to be for everybody or nobody, because the system is broken. And I would imagine that if any legislation does make it to his desk to reinstate some of these things, he'll just veto it.
Yeah, I guess the problem is, if you say it's just for heinous crimes, you still have the question of evidence and chain of evidence and the same problems that you've had.
Well, and of course the other
all
problem
of
is that the truly heinous crimes are the ones that tend to get people most excited and loose and take their eye off the justice ball, so to speak. When you see these cases that did end up in with these miscarriages of justice, the Paris case was a terrible case. These newlyweds stabbed 1 million times and
by
their house burned.
the one Randy Steidl was
the
accused
Randy
of
Steidl
and
one,
convicted
and
of.
of course the Nicaragua case with this poor little girl being killed and raped, and it was just these horrible crimes, truly heinous crimes, but they resulted in these miscarriages of justice. I think in part because everybody gets so worked up, or someone's
want
got
a conviction.
Someone's got to pay for this. So
right.
I worked on when I worked for the county. I worked on 2 death penalty cases. One, Dale Lash, the last
horrible
person
case. Yeah.
who was on death row before George Ryan cleared it, and then Jarvis Neely, a young man out of Peoria, convicted of murdering a police officer. Lash got the death penalty, was guilty beyond all shadow of a doubt, but he was cleared. Jarvis Neely was not sentenced to death. I believe life in prison, and that was a case out of Peoria County. But yeah, it's to see what goes into a death penalty case. The bar is raised that much higher, and any case, any murder can be made into. Someone's going to say, well, this is a heinous crime.
Right.
It's easier to just put the lid, put it on the shelf, and be done.
Yeah, and I will notice that there are some people in Springfield and around the state, I think like 40 people. There's a whole death penalty defense unit that was run by the state, and these lawyers are now going to be out of work because they no longer have death penalty cases
There were a number of people who had appeals
defend.
pending before
Right.
the Illinois Supreme Court.
Right.
That now all gets sent back because you've got an automatic appeal because of the death penalty. Now you fall back in line with everybody else who's trying to appeal your sentence.
Well, I think we have time for one more quick social issue. Catholic Conference officials had a press conference this week, and they have an agenda. One of them is that they want anyone seeking an abortion to be offered the opportunity to see an ultrasound of their baby. Where's that going? Alex, were you up on that one?
I myself didn't. I didn't cover the Catholic Conference Blue Room conference, as they say. But you know what? I mean, with all of the things that have been going through House committees about abortion, and the Catholic Conference has been really up on these kinds of issues for a long time. It's been part of their agenda. So, if it makes it through a committee, I wouldn't be surprised. It might even come up for a floor debate. What would you say about that?
I talked with people at Planned Parenthood. They're shocked. They thought they were expecting.
They're having enough trouble at the national level right now.
They were expecting a conservative push here in Illinois based on what happened in the last election, but they thought it would be about state spending and jobs and the economy. And now you're seeing this big push on some conservative social issues. That was a bit baffling. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that this is some of these pieces of legislation are red meat for the meat eaters. Lawmakers have to take this back
I don't
home.
think the Bishop of Springfield was here to provide red meat.
No,
I think he believes what he's
I
saying.
think the bishop truly does, but I think that some of these lawmakers, you've been around here, people introduce a bill they know is not going to go anywhere. It's a plan that will never become law, but you have to be able to go back home and say, look, guys, I'm fighting the good fight for you.
Well, Bernie and I were in that Blue Room conference, and I asked the spokesman for the conference, I said, why are you not making this make it mandatory for the woman to look at the picture?
Because it's just.
And I said, is that political? Just political reality? You just have to say, do you want to see it? She says, no. There are places now where they have to show it to the woman. I said, is it the reason just political reality? And he basically said, yeah. I said, so if they pass this year, the next year you'll come back with a bill to force women to look at this picture. And he basically said, yeah, that's our goal. They're very open.
Are you going to hold her face to?
Well,
look at the monitor? I don't.
Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, that gets into a whole.
As in all things move on, because I don't think anybody would have thought when like 40 states had no concealed carry that we would come to this in guns. So things do move, and people who advocate these things keep trying. That about ends our time. It's been a fun show. Alex Degman, Benjamin Yount, Eric Zorn, thanks for being here. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.